Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do. But if I learned one thing in 40 years of politics, John, there's always one question too many. And I don't want to set out what that low-hanging fruit is, and I will tell you exactly why. Every time I went to negotiate in Europe in the 1990s, some clever devil decided to produce a whole list of things that I ought to negotiate. And when I then went out to negotiate, and the Europeans said, you don't really care about this, you're just responding to the pressure back home. And they dug their toes in and made my negotiation infinitely harder. I tell you this, the people who wish the Prime Minister well will not be setting out a list of things he needs to achieve in public. If they're members of Parliament, they can go and see him in private. So if you hear members of Parliament in public setting out a list of what the Prime Minister has to achieve, you'll know two things. Firstly, they're either stupid or they're malicious. If they're stupid, they ought not to be in Parliament, and if they're malicious, I wish they weren't in Parliament. So I am not going to fall into that trap of giving you a list. There is low-hanging fruit. There's some quite important things. Europe is crying out for reform. You mentioned Denmark this morning. Go to Holland. Hear what the Dutch Prime Minister's saying. We can't do everything in Europe. Would you have expected that from the Dutch 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Would you expect the sort of thing Mrs. Merkel is now saying? There's a whole range of things, but not if we go to Europe and say, we want an exception on this, we want an exception on that, we want an exception on something else. That's not the way to do it. We go there and we form alliances with the other countries who are looking at the same things. So we change the way Europe operates, not push Britain further adrift by just asking for a whole series of exceptions. And now, I could list those, but I'm not for the reason I set out. Tempting though it is to be nice to a man with an interesting hat.